morning, children. Welcome back to Class 5 English, Lesson 8, Demosthenes. Demosthenes was one of the very old orators of the world who used to move people with his speeches. If at first you do not succeed, try again. There are few people in this world who have followed this piece of advice and achieved goals which seemed impossible. Demosthenes was born with a severe speech problem, but it did not discourage him. He practiced hard and became one of the great orators of his time. As suggested in the first line, that if you do not succeed, try again. Few people do this in the world and few may not. But here, Demosthenes was such a person who had a severe, means a very bad speech problem, but it did not discourage him. He practiced and he became one of the greatest orators of his time. Orators means people who make speeches in public and are very good speakers. In this chapter, we see Demosthenes fighting out all his outs and overcoming all his shortcomings to become one of the best orators of the world. In his childhood, he had to face a number of financial difficulties after his father's death. His guardians and relatives took away all his money. He fought back and revived a low amount after defeating them in the court of law. This chapter we can see how Demosthenes struggled or he fought against the outs and overcomings. What happened to him in his childhood and how was he and what has happened to him. We see him giving his first speech which turned out to be disastrous one. His second speech was a disaster too. But after his second speech, he was advised by Cyrus, who was a theatre actor, on how to give a proper speech. After speaking to Cyrus, Demosthenes realized that he should give his speech with full of emotions so that it's not boring and it's moving for the spectators. Finally, Demosthenes learned the correct way to give his speech publicly. So, in this lesson, let us see the struggle and the fight which Demosthenes had faced in his childhood. As a boy, Demosthenes was shy and delicate. As a boy, how was Demosthenes? He was a shyish boy and delicate. Delicate means he was not strong. When he made his first public speech, his voice was weak and his words were not clear. He stammered. He could hear people laugh and jeer at him. He tried to press on but had to stop his speech and leave. How was the first public speech? When he spoke in public first time, he stammered. Stammered means spoke with pauses, repeating the same sound. He was stopping in each and every way wherever he couldn't recognize what to say. What did the people do? They used to laugh and they used to make rude comments in a loud voice which he himself could hear. He tried to press on. He tried to press on means he tried to continue. But what happened, with lot of difficulty he continued his speech but he could not continue it. He stopped and he left. Demosthenes could not bear the thought that people found his speech strange and funny. He knew he needed to do something about it, and so began a journey which made him one of the greatest Athenian orators. Here in this paragraph, it's told that Demosthenes couldn't bear the speech which was spoken by the people behind him. And also, what did he do? So, he wanted to become an greatest Athenian orators. Athenian means people from the Greek city of Athens are called as Athenians. So, he wanted to become a great Athenian orator. Demosthenes' father was a wealthy sword maker in Athens. He had died when his son was 7 years old. Although his father left him a fortune, Demosthenes' guardians were not very careful with his money. They lost some of it and spent some of themselves. In the end, they did not have enough money to give him a good education. Demosthenes was angry with his guardians. Was there a way he could make them feel sorry? He may not have known then that it was learning to speak that would help him. Athens then had some great orators. Demosthenes had often heard his teachers talk about them, and he longed to listen to their public speeches. Now, in this paragraph, Demosthenes had lost his father in his age of 7, and the guardians who looked after him spent the money lavishly. And what happened? They could not give Demosthenes a very good education, what wanted to be given by his father. Demosthenes was very angry with his guardians, and later on he wanted to become a great orator, and he wanted to talk in public, and he wanted to give speeches in public. One day, not long after that, he heard that Callistratus, an orator who everyone admired, was to speak at a great trial that was taking place in the city. Demosthenes heard people talk about Callistratus and begged his tutor to allow him to be in the courtroom when he spoke. The tutor agreed and even arranged a seat from where Demosthenes could see and hear all that went on. Now, what happened? One day, a famous orator called as Callistratus came to the city where he lived. Demosthenes wanted to listen to his speech. So he begged his tutor, his master, to go to the courtroom where the Callistratus wanted to give a speech. So the tutor arranged a place for him and made him to sit where Demosthenes could see the speech and listen the speech carefully. The speech was full of power and purpose, means it had a clear message and made a strong effect on people's mind. When Callistratus had finished, the Athenians crowded round him and many even followed him home. Demosthenes was impressed and inspired. Demosthenes was very much amazed by the speech and admired the orator Callistratus. The speech was very much motivated, encouraged, and it was full of admiration. He had to said to himself, I too will be an orator and make people think about what I am saying. I want to have the power of words to make people agree with me and believe me. In his heart, he also thought maybe this special talent will also help me fight against the injustice my guardians have done for me. Now, looking or hearing the speech of Callistratus, Demosthenes was very much impressed and he was inspired by the words of Callistratus, and he also wanted to be an orator, and also he thought that this special talent will help him to fight against the injustice which was done by his guardians to him. Demosthenes knew that he must work hard to succeed. For the next 2 years, he read history, wrote speeches, and listened to famous orators. When he was 18, he believed he was ready to speak in public. He decided to fight against his guardians in a court of law. At first, no one took him seriously, but Demosthenes pleaded his case and again and again. In the end, he won, and his guardians were ordered by the court to return his money to him. But it was too late. There was very little money left to recover. Now, what happened? Demosthenes, he knew that to become like Callistratus, what he have to do, he will have to work hard to succeed in his life. So, for further 2 years, he read his books of history, wrote speeches, and he listened to the famous speeches by the great orators. And when he was 18 years, he thought that he will go and speak in public. And also he decided to fight against his guardians in the court. And what happened? He pleaded his case, means he argued in the court of law to prove that his guardians had been very unfair to him. And what did he do? He wanted to get back the amount what his father had given to their guardians. But what happened? He won the case in the court, but the guardians could not recover all the money back to him. Once more, Demosthenes felt great sadness and anger, but he would not give up and went on to speak in the assembly of Athens. But his first address was a failure. He knew it from the faces of the people around him and was filled with shame. This is surely the last time I speak in public, he thought sadly. He left the assembly and walked slowly down the road without realizing where he was going. Suddenly, he felt someone touch his arm. It was an old man who had heard him speak in the assembly. He had seen how sad and disappointed Demosthenes was. He looked at him keenly and praised him. He told him that his speech reminded him of the great orator Pericles. "How can you give up so easily, Demosthenes?" he asked. Demosthenes felt encouraged and tried again, but he failed a second time. This time he left the assembly, hiding his face in the cloak. An actor named Cyrus, who knew him well, followed him. He knew that Demosthenes would be in despair. After this, Demosthenes started to speak in the assembly of Athens. His first speech was a great failure, and what happened? But he was encouraged by a old person. The second speech was also a great failure, and here he was encouraged by an actor called as Cyrus, who had knew him and who had followed him. Demosthenes did not hide his feelings from Cyrus. A sailor with a foolish story will make them applaud, while if I tell them tales of the glorious deeds of their own countrymen, they do not care, he said bitterly. True, Demosthenes, answered Cyrus, but I will tell you why it is so, if you will recite to me some lines from one of our great poets. Then Demosthenes recited some poems to him. He spoke the words correctly, but his voice was dull. Now what happened? Demosthenes could not hide his feelings from Cyrus. He told that when a sailor with a foolish story will make the people, what happens? The people will clap for the foolish story when they hear. But what happens? The same glorious deeds of the person, great heroic actions of the person of our countrymen, if I talk about them, the people will be bitterly. Bitterly means with a feeling that he had failed and could not succeed. So our people are like that. Till then, Cyrus will say that, yes, true, you tell me one of the great lines of some poets. Then Demosthenes will recite the lines in front of him. At that time, Cyrus will say that whatever you have told is correct, but the word, what you spoke was, the voice, how you spoke was in a very dull voice. There was awkwardness in the way he delivered the speech. When Demosthenes finished, Cyrus repeated the lines back to him. Demosthenes stood still with surprise. He could not believe that they were the same lines. The actor's eyes flashed, his voice rose and fell, and his body swayed as he spoke. Now what happened? When Demosthenes spoke, the speech was delivered very poorly and with difficulty because Demosthenes did not have the skill or confidence in him. But in spite, when Cyrus repeated the same lines, Demosthenes stood still with surprise, and he could not really believe the same lines were repeated by Cyrus. Demosthenes understood why his speeches did not interest the Athenians. He realized that he must not only read or recite them but also act them. Now, looking into Cyrus and hearing the speech of Cyrus, what happened? Demosthenes understood that how he have to deliver the speech to the audience. It is not reading or reciting the thing in front of the audience, but he have to act in front of them. From that day on, Demosthenes began to work in a different way. He converted one of the cellars of his house into a study. There he practiced undisturbed. He often lived in his study for 2 or 3 months at a stretch. They say he went to the seashore and shouted his speech with pebbles in his mouth. It made him struggle to bring out every sound. So when he spoke without the stones, the words came through loud and clear. He watched himself in mirror as he spoke to improve his expressions, gestures, and actions. In this paragraph, we can see the hard work of Demosthenes and what he did after he heard Cyrus' speech. He converted one of the underground rooms of the house into a study where he practiced undisturbed. For 2 to 3 months at a stretch, he used to live in that study and he used to practice. How he used to practice? As he was lying in a seashore and he shouted his speech with pebbles, means keeping the small stones inside his mouth. He used to shout his speech. And what happened? He struggled a lot, and later on, what happened? His speech became loud and clear. He used to watch himself in front of the mirror and he used to speak in front of the mirror, looking into his expressions and gestures and actions. Gestures means the movement of the hands or head while giving a speech, and also the actions. This shows that how practice makes man perfect. As the same Demosthenes also worked hard, he tried over and practiced a lot. He practiced speaking as he walked or ran along the sea. He raised his voice so that he could be heard over the roaring. He also practiced speaking as he ran up a hill. All these trained his breath, voice, and tone. Demosthenes' speeches were now filled with drama and purpose. He was no longer the boy who was shy and spoke with a stammer. Now, what happened? He used to practice. How he used to practice? He used to practice speaking as he was walking, as he was running, as he was running up in the hill. He trained. He was well trained his breath and his voice and his tone, the strength and the quality of the voice also he wanted to improvise. Demosthenes' speeches were now filled with drama. Drama means very excitement, and his speeches were not dull, and also they had a purpose in that. He did not remain a shyish boy and he was not a stammering boy. At last he became one of the great orators of the world who used to move people with his speeches. I hope all have understood the lesson, children. As Demosthenes practiced, he worked hard. You too work hard to achieve your goals in the life. Thank you.